Hello my friends, in today's video we will be comparing Sony A7 IV and A7R III. The popularity of the A7R III might have been overshadowed by the A7 III over the years, but the R version also has a substantial user base. The resolution increase of the A7 IV moved it a bit closer to the R line. The A7 IV is generally a more modern platform, so the first question that I will try to answer in this video is whether it makes sense to upgrade or switch from A7R III to A7 IV. On the other hand, the A7R III is still a very capable camera, especially the A version, so I will also try to help decide those who are maybe choosing between these two right now. A7 IV and A7R III are similar on the outside, but there are some significant differences. Both cameras are exceptionally compact. Despite that the A7 IV is a little bit thicker, the weight difference is just 1 gram. Both cameras use magnesium frame and both feel very solid. The build quality is a little bit better on the A7 IV. It has better weather sealing, proper port doors instead of those hanging flaps, and much nicer texture on the grip. As I've explained before, A7 III has a more durable tilting screen mechanism. Size to performance ratio has also been one of the main strengths of the A7 IV line, which is definitely the case with both A7R III and A7 IV. A major difference between the A7 IV and A7R III is the sensor. Both cameras use full-frame BSI sensors, but the A7R III offers 9 more megapixels. So how much difference does that make in the real world? On a 32-inch 4K screen, it doesn't make that much difference, to be honest. 33 megapixels is in my opinion more than enough for overwhelming majority of digital publishing. Just like the A7R III, A7 IV also doesn't have an AA filter which would decrease the sharpness. Looking at A7 IV and R3 images side by side, I can hardly tell the difference. If you like to zoom into your images or you tend to crop and reframe a lot, then you might benefit from those extra 9 megapixels. If you feel like 33 megapixels is not enough, you might want to go straight to the A7R IV. You will see much more real-world difference with that one. The high ISO and dynamic range segment of my Sony comparisons is indeed getting repetitive because it is basically the same with all Sony full-frame cameras released since 2017. Both cameras are super clean and virtually indistinguishable below ISO 3200. ISO 6400 is still usable for most platforms. There might be some differences in the noise structure, but the signal-to-noise ratio is basically the same. ISO 12800 is mostly usable for documentary purposes. There is a lot of noise on both at ISO 25600, so that is mainly an emergency option. The dynamic range is also pretty much identical and therefore outstanding. For digital publishing, you can push it as far as you want to. I generally don't think that the dynamic range will limit your printing or publishing options in the vast majority of situations. Even in very challenging conditions such as the sunsets or 12 o'clock sun, I was always able to extract enough information from the RAWs without introducing too much noise. On the other hand, there is a difference when it comes to the colors. The A7R III can shoot very nice images in the majority of light conditions. The main difference will be visible in specific situations such as overcast sky, sunsets, and HDR scenes where the main subject is in shade. The A7 IV also works incredibly well in my overhead scene, which is very difficult due to the yellow-orange background. One specific advantage of the A7R IV is the pixel shift mode, which basically bypasses the debayering process. That greatly increases the amount of captured detail without increasing the resolution, but it requires a tripod and post-merging of 4 photos, so I don't really use it, to be honest. Another area where we can see the differences is the autofocus. A7R III will work more than fine in the majority of reasonable situations. It uses an older autofocus system with 399 phase detection points and 425 contrast detection points. A7R III autofocus is still better than with any Fuji or Panasonic camera. A7 IV uses the latest system with 759 phase detection points and 425 contrast detection points. You will mainly see the differences in difficult situations such as the low light, backlit scenes, fast moving subjects and so on, where the A7R III might struggle. The A7IV will not struggle. A7IV autofocus generally feels more consistent and committed. Another difference are the smart features and settings. A7IV offers real-time tracking in both stills and video. It works with humans and also with animals. And it works incredibly well. A7R III only offers real-time eye autofocus in stills, but it also works very well. A big difference is that the A7IV has a normal touch tracking where you can just tap onto the screen and it will track the subject. A7R III only has center lock-on AF, which is very cumbersome, slow to set up, and not very reliable. A7IV has 7 steps for autofocus speed and 5 for sensitivity or responsiveness. That allows you to fine-tune the autofocus behavior very precisely. A7R III has 3 speed settings and 2 responsiveness settings. That is also sufficient for more stills-oriented cameras such as A7R III. When it comes to the video, the A7IV is better in every single way. First of all, it can shoot fully downsampled 7K to 4K video, whereas the A7R III has to use pixel binning or line skipping. That means that the A7IV can capture more detail and there are no artifacts. A big difference is that the A7IV can shoot 4K in 10-bit 422. That is important if you want to color grade your footage. Especially if you want to use picture profile with a flat gamma curve, you definitely need that 10-bit color information. If you want to shoot log, the A7IV is a clear choice over the A7R III. S-Log doesn't work well with 8-bit footage at all. A7IV can also shoot all intra video, but the long GOP saves a lot of space, so I would only use the all intra when the project requires it. Another difference is that the A7IV can shoot 4K 60p. As everybody knows by now, it does so with a 1.5 times crop, but the image quality of cropped 4K 60p video is very solid. The A7R IV can also shoot very nice APS-C video, but only up to 30p. Overall, the A7R III video is good enough for photographers who want to shoot some video on the side. If you primarily care about the video, or even if you are a hybrid user, A7IV is a clear choice. Regarding the in-body image stabilization, both cameras are rated for 5.5 stops. Both systems will have similar efficiency in stills mode. At 24mm I was able to go down to about 1/5 of the second consistently. The behavior of the in-body image stabilization in the video is very different though. What I don't like about the A7R III IBIS is that it tries to keep the image fixed in one place and then it suddenly snaps when it can no longer do so. A7IV just continuously smooths out the image, so there are no sudden jumps or anything like that. Two more advantages of the A7IV are the pose stabilization and active mode. The active mode combines in-body image stabilization and digital stabilization. The additional crop in active mode is about 1.1 times, which is quite acceptable. A7IV can also capture data from the gyroscope, which can be utilized to stabilize the footage in Sony's Catalyst Brow software. That can be extremely effective, and I hope that Sony will continue to develop this technology in the future. The handling is fairly similar, but there are some differences. First of all, A7IV has quite a large and deep grip. It is well shaped and it will be a welcome change for users with larger hands. I didn't mind the Gen 3 grip, but I do prefer the A7IV grip. The buttons are also much more raised, which helps a lot if you are wearing gloves. The placement of the buttons and dials is very similar on both, which is a good thing in my opinion. There are 3 changes though. The first one is the relocation of the video recording button, but it is possible to reprogram that back to C1, which makes more sense in my opinion. The second difference is that the exposure compensation dial on A7IV is programmable and you can use it for various functions. The third and the most important positive change is the addition of stills and video mode switch on A7IV. That gives you completely separate settings for stills and video. If you use different settings for both, including exposure and picture profile settings, this will be a huge upgrade. The biggest difference is the user interface though. The A7IV user interface is much more responsive, fully controllable by the touchscreen, and generally more modern. Especially the main menu is a huge improvement over the old horizontal non-touch based Sony menu. It is very well organized and in my opinion probably the best menu system on the market at the moment. The old main menu is actually not that big of an issue on the A7R III simply because it is a much less complex camera. There aren't that many video or autofocus settings, so you don't really have to use the main menu at all after the initial setup. You can definitely get by using the function menu and my menu. Regardless of that, the A7 IV wins by a huge margin when it comes to the user interface. Regarding the screens, it depends on whether we compare the original R3 or the R3A. If we compare the original R3 and A7 IV screen, surprisingly I prefer the A7 IV. A7R III has a high resolution at 1.44 million dots in comparison to 1.04 million dots on A7 IV, but the A7 IV screen is 3x2 whereas the A7R III screen is 4x3. That means that you will get a larger image on A7 IV, which makes more difference in my opinion. The A7 IV screen is generally surprisingly fine. The sharpness is okay, the color accuracy is very good, and it is sufficiently bright. If we compare A7 IV and A7R IIIA, then I would say that the 2.36 million dot resolution trumps the 3x2 aspect ratio. This new A screen is fantastic especially for manual focusing or if you need to review the sharpness of your images. I really like this screen on my A7R IVA. The viewfinder on both cameras is the same. It is a well-known 3.69 million dot panel with 0.78 times magnification. It is completely fine to use, sufficiently detailed, and the size is about right. It is not as impressive as the 5.7 or 9.4 million dot viewfinders on A7R IV or A7S III, but those are more of a luxury rather than necessity. Both cameras can shoot 10 frames per second with autofocus continuous and mechanical shutter. A downgrade is that the A7 IV can only shoot compressed 12-bit RAWs at maximal speed. It can only shoot 6 frames per second with uncompressed RAWs. A7R III can do that with uncompressed RAWs despite the high resolution. A7 IV is still a significantly better camera for fast shooting though. The main reason for that is basically unlimited buffer if you use a CF Express card. Access to the playback menu is also much faster with the A7 IV. Autofocus improvements such as the real-time IAF for birds also make the A7 IV very capable wildlife camera. Besides that, the A7 IV has two UHS-2 compatible SD card slots, whereas the A7R III only has one UHS-2 and one UHS-1 slot. That means that you can have full-speed backup writing to both SD cards with A7 IV. One of those slots is also compatible with CF Express Type A cards. The main benefit of those is buffer clearing and capacity. All video codecs on A7 IV work with SD cards as I've explained in A7 IV review. Both cameras use the same NP-FZ100 batteries. CPAR rating on A7 IV is 580 shots and 650 on A7R III, but the difference in the real-world use is very minor. You can get anywhere between 700 and 2000 shots depending on the specific usage. The battery life on both A7 IV and A7R III is still the best in class. To sum up, as you can probably guess, I think that the A7 IV is a better choice for the majority of users who are choosing a new camera. It is a significantly more modern platform with various upgrades such as the new autofocus system, much superior video specs, better colors, modern user interface, handling improvements, and so on. Basically, the only three advantages of the A7R III are those 9 extra megapixels, high resolution mode, and option to shoot 14-bit RAWs at 10 frames per second. An extra advantage of the A7R IIIA is the new screen. If you care about the video, A7 IV is the clear choice, there is no comparison there. If you are a stills-only photographer, I still wouldn't say that those 9 extra megapixels are worth choosing the older platform. If you can take advantage of very high resolution, I would recommend checking out the A7R IV. R4 will provide much more significant increase of resolution and a lot of 4th gen improvements. If you already have A7R III, does it make sense to upgrade to A7 IV? I'm inclined to say yes. Hybrid and video-oriented users will greatly benefit from video capabilities of the A7 IV. Stills-only shooters will mainly benefit from the autofocus, better colors, and user experience benefits. I don't think that those 3 downgrades in comparison to A7R III will be that significant. So overall, I think that the A7 IV is the winner of this comparison. So that's it for this video, thank you for watching, I hope that you liked this video and that you found it to be useful. Stay tuned for more videos and maybe consider subscribing if you don't want to miss my future content. I appreciate your feedback in form of thumbs up or thumbs down. If you would like to ask anything or share your opinion, please do so in the comment section, and see you next time.